100 points essay for ninth grade. Reminiscence. Picture someone you love, his voice, his face, his laugh. If you can, then you're so lucky. Because for years I thought I saw him, but came to face that what I imagined was wrong. It was not his voice. It was not his face. It was someone else altogether, because I had forgotten him completely. When I was 1 year old, my parents divorced. My father had found someone else, so Mom and I left him to live across the street with my grandparents, 2 uncles, and their families. It was in a small district in Beijing, China, and there was no escape from seeing my father every day, just across the street. Mom left for America 6 years later, and during her absence my father and stepmother took me to all the places I'd never been: the zoo, the Forbidden City, the Temple of Heaven. Mom came back 2 years later to take me away with her across the world to the US, and I went without complaint. There, in a strange, hollow country I'd never heard of. The divorce was still an evil thing my father did, and no one ever forgave him. My grandparents spat on his name. My uncles pretended he never existed. Everyone else in my family had found happiness, except for Mom, because of him. Grandma told me, when he is old, broken, and asks you for money, you must remember how he wronged you and your mother, and shut the door in his face. And I did. When I was little, I would look up at my father's tall, capable frame and thought he looked near identical to Jet Li. Not only that, but they had the same last name. And so all these years away from him, his face slowly morphed into Jet Li's and his voice into a background, nasally murmur, never audible or clear. He never laughed. Besides taking an unnatural liking to Jet Li, nothing came out of our years apart. And when the summer before last I went back to China, where I saw my father again, how strange it was to be there. Then as I stood that summer, looking at him from above, he was so small. How was he ever tall? He looked nothing like Jet Li. Who is this man whose face I'd seen 1,000 times but never seen at all? Now I realized that my family's hatred toward my father made me ashamed of him, and to cover his shame I never truly looked at him, never truly heard his voice, didn't think he could laugh. And there I stood, looking at a small man I knew, only distantly, where I shut him away into the corner of my mind. My father and I began to exchange emails after that summer. At first I was afraid to speak to him, on the phone, and realized we had nothing to talk about. I was afraid that when he finally knows me, he'd shake his head in disappointment and realize I was nothing special, that I was undeserving of his love. So I did everything I could to avoid his face. But in the end I sent him an email, and in this way we truly met, his words in Chinese, mine in English, both needing help to understand each other. Every time I read the words "I love you" at the end of every email, I cried. Mom spoke of him regularly now, after seeing him again, and I tuned out at every mention of his name. So I hid away from that corner in my mind, behind casualty and how are you and fines, because that's where rejection possibly lay. Mom says next summer I'll see him again. I look forward to it, but there is always that strange sense of relief of not having to confront him now. When I think of him, I can only see an idea. Even now I am losing him again. And maybe he, on the other side of the world, the opposite corner, is doing the exact same thing and losing me. Hopefully sometime in the future, he will come across the sea of my mind, take my hand, and lead me forward, where I've only been once before, lost, looking for my father.